Welcome to the Infinity Loop Group. I'm Riley.
I'm Krista.
And we are going to be diving into the father wound today. This present moment isn't free of the burdens, the memories and wounds of the past. They must be attended to before you can look around. Breathe easily and love the moment you are in right now. A good beginning is to catch yourself when you have a bad memory and say, I am not that person anymore. For the truth is, you are not. Deepak Chopra.
Again, I want to honor Deepak Chopra of just the beautiful integration of his masculine and feminine, his divine masculine and feminine. And he just carries so much masculine strength with such beautiful gentleness and just acceptance of, and that's what that is, the acceptance and honesty of this is where I am in this moment and not spiritually bypassing it, honoring our wounds.
Honoring the journey.
Yeah. I asked my former partner and friend Leo Gorcey Jr. to describe his experience with the father wound. He wrote the book, Me and the Dead End Kid, about his father's life and their relationship. It's a beautiful, hilarious, and painful story of Leo Jr.'s healing process. Even though he wrote that book in 2003 and experienced a tremendous healing, Leo's aware of how that wound wasn't fully healed and continued to hurt him and others. This is what he had to say about the father wound. Leo, the father wound is about not being enough and living in the shadow. You end up feeling you're not okay. It's passed down from generation to generation. The father's wound takes up all the space, and because it does, the son learns to be invisible. It's true to some degree for every man. However, some express their wound with acting out, acting bigger and more aggressive. It's either shame or shamelessness, and often it's a dance between the two. I've struggled with both not loving myself and disappearing and taking up all the oxygen in the room. Krista, I said, ironically, narcissistic behavior is often a byproduct where there isn't an authentic self-love present. Too little self-love, the wrong amount, or expression of it can be part of the equation. It can be there's too much love of the separate self. The phrase, he's just so in love with himself, refers to the grandstanding that may be there to make up for the father wound. I believe that defense mechanism of too much self-love to make up for the father wound can be expressed as being self-centered and narcissistic. I'm not referring to true narcissists and pathologicals, as this book doesn't address them. I would say I am referring maybe to where that is. It's the too much love of the separate self to make up for the lack of soul, authentic self-love.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my experience with this behavior, I find it in men and women with the father wound. It's like the almost identical behavior, just displayed a little differently from the man and the woman.
Okay, tell us more.
Well, okay, so the insecure man goes to try and get as many girls as he can to fill this wound, to quote unquote make the imaginary father proud of you, because that's like the assumed attempt of value. And sadly, from my experience, a lot of time the woman then will end up doing the same kind of concept, where they're kind of looking for a father in every man that they try and sleep with. And then they're continuously sleeping with men who never plan to actually take care of them or be there for them. Then they have this habit of being with men who leave them just like their father maybe left them, and it creates this...
And that they're not enough.
Right. And then so they never feel enough, so then they continue to give themselves to men who don't see them as being enough, right? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I would say then for men, it's the other way around of like not being enough. And that's why they're never really even looking for the relationship. They're just looking for the sex, because to stay in a relationship would have to prove their worth, to prove their value. They'd have to, fight it out.
You would be staying in a relationship is confronting the very wound,
Right?
because you would have to grow. You would have to face your insecurities, your inadequacies. It would touch on the very things that you believe to be true. I'm not okay. And any relationship, besides just the superficial dating a ton of different women, bedding a bunch of different women, chasing, love bombing a bunch of different women, and sex addiction, you never have to confront the wound.
Well, and there's no risk of anyone leaving you or saying that you are not enough because you're making that decision ahead of time.
Yeah, you've got another one in the hopper, backfilled. When we have authentic self-love, we're more likely to have humility and confidence. Leo said, yes, that is so true. In the father wound, the son never got the blessing from his father that said he was enough. Many men never heard or experienced that blessing from their father, and so they go through life with shame, anger, pain, defensiveness, insecurity, and striving for acceptance from the patriarchal system.
Well, I mean, I think about, I want to say I was 23 or 24, and I had to tell my father that I needed to hear him say he loved me. And his response was, well, my father never told me he loved me, so I didn't think you needed to hear it. And, in his defense, I would say he never gets off the phone now without saying it. He's really softened up and changed a lot, but it's that I needed him to tell me he loved me when he was getting off the phone. And, and then his response was kind of like, well, shit, my dad never did. And it's, to me, it's just, I have that much sympathy for him of his father wound, and, not blaming him for my pain or feeling lack of. Because again, we are very much in a healthier, closer place now.
Okay, we're back. So the two things I was thinking of is two concepts. You were talking about your father and what he didn't learn from his father. And I was thinking about my necessary nemesis this morning, and his father, he definitely was living under the father wound. So people who that really have very pathological behavior, the trauma, and I knew his father, spent some time with him, and it was pretty apparent. He was nice, but it was very apparent he was a narcissist, and the wounds that he caused his son, and how that then spilled out to all the other, the need to even act in that whole dominating, really abusive way. And then I'm also thinking about clients. I've had male clients that are really living under the father wound, but have no awareness of it all. They'd read the chapter and go, no, I don't, that doesn't resonate with me. I don't see that my dad was fine. Everything was fine, but their life doesn't line up.
Well, even that language of everything is fine. It's such a malign, just like glossing over of things, right? It's if things are fine, you're clearly not diving into the details, because nothing is ever fine. Either things are amazing or they're falling apart. And especially when you talk about relationships, there is no, it's fine. Yeah,
it's like where did this behavior come from then? Where is this? What happened where you're so defensive? What happened along the way that needs to be living so much in the small self? And maybe it's just the lack of spiritual culture that so many people have grown up with no connection to transcendence and a higher power and the beauty and when that's lacking, you can really start to see it with no spiritual mooring to just go, to give you access the awareness of the bigger self, life is not just about the small ego construct. Many have never heard or experienced that blessing from their fathers, and so they go through life with shame, anger, pain, defensiveness, insecurity, and striving for acceptance from the patriarchal system. In our situation, Krista, you were in touch with your business instincts, but I was still struggling. Not only was I not able to affirm and allow you to be heard and use your gifts and intelligence more fully, I just wanted to trust the father figures in the company, which were usually driver, authoritative men. These men were often the architects of the culture that needed to be transformed. So women are hurt by the father wound. And when you were talking, Riley, about how women behave, that's how I've seen women behave in a company where I've talked about how they will cater to men's egos, and it's like their own father wound they're almost become small.
Well, and I think this is a great example Leo mentions here, where it's when you don't have a healthy relationship with your father, you are searching for fathers in every other man, and so you are pretty much giving yourself an opportunity to be just taken advantage of.
And I think what's really coming out now, people speaking up, is so many problems in society are because of the fatherless culture. I mean, the number of people without fathers now is just, it's just skyrocketed.
Well, it's like, sadly, that those statistics of your higher chance to go to jail if you live under a two-parent household, or like you only have a one-parent. But what's wild is the statistics are actually the same if it's just a father. So the single-parent rule only actually applies if it's only the mother. If you're just a father, it ends up having the same statistics as both parents. And I think
regarding like being able to be successful,
right? So
and productive in society,
right? So like your chances of going to jail, your chances of going to college, all these things do not correlate of just being one parent. It's no. It's only if you just have a mother. Does it increase your chances to go to jail? Lowers your chances for.
I mean, I've heard those statistics. Well, that you can't argue with that.
Well, to me, it comes from what is the difference at the root of like what a mother and father bring. And in my experience, or at least like trying to simplify it, it's the mother brings the unconditional love and the father brings the more conditional love. Yes, he loves you unconditionally.
Sometimes it's flipped. Yeah.
Right. Well, but I mean, and ideally he should love you unconditionally, but there should be structure, right? Like that is his goal, to create the structure for you to thrive in the world that we live in. And I just appreciate how many men are trying to do that. You know, they've even noticed when, okay, maybe the father's not in the life, but he has a lot of men in his life, and then that can take the place of a father.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, I'm thinking about how I work with men, and sometimes they're single men, they're raising kids. And if they can embrace their childlikeness and playfulness and bring in and not feel so much responsibility to be the heavy and be more, it's so much more enjoyable for them and holistic, right? So they're not.
You're talking about being the balanced father, not just being the disciplinarian.
Yeah, and right, and just bringing in the joy and playfulness and more of the nurture and more of the peace and acceptance and spaciousness. The more developmental model. Well, I try to work with men to be a more developmental model.
Well, the wound definitely is not always just occurred because the father is absent. I think more often, or not more often, but very often, the wound is caused because the father is there and he only pushes on one one petal, right? Whether it is, no, he only loves you, but gives you no structure, or no, he only gave you structure, but gave you no love. From what I see and notice from people, it's, I see actually more of a wound from that than
Right.
I do from an absent father.
Right. I mean, I think like Leo's father did love him according to what people around him said, but he was so hard on him because the mother was so out of it. You know what I mean? So it's they don't know how to express that love and nurture to really balance out. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, great fathers are what a gift. Great men, what a gift. Men who have done their work or come from really healthy backgrounds. Not knowing how to transform the pain, we transmit the pain. We run over women by not affirming them when their truth is contrary to the father figure we seek acceptance from, or by being bigger and louder and the authority to them. Intimacy is the biggest threat to us men because that's where we're most vulnerable, and so we shut that down too. We medicate the split with what numbs: anger, ego, distraction, addiction, power. Anger is a strategy to push away the love we need to be healed because we don't think we're enough and worth it. The threat is, I'm going to let this person get close to me and they're just going to confirm I'm not enough and I'll be rejected. It's so sad when I see this in men, but they have no awareness. Even like when they read this, they have no awareness that they are doing this exact thing and the power to choose different.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know in my 20s, I was doing a lot of that, where you go, you keep the relationship superficial, so you never truly have to give yourself to someone for them to be able to reject you.
It's a miracle any man gets healed or matures in our Western culture because there's no rite of passage for us or mentoring. That's why we need wise teachers to help us. Then I said, and being wise is knowing how to tune into the real need and not just rattling off spiritual jargon, which isn't helpful. Sometimes spiritual teachings are used unskillfully. This can occur toward a man who's feeling his not enoughness. Byron Katie and Eckhart Tolle's teachings about questioning the mind can be oversimplified and misused. Someone can be told they need to stop believing a story they're telling themselves when what they really need is to go deeper. And I know that's exactly out of a coach that goes, you need to just drop that story to a man. And I knew the situation. It was like, oh, no, he needs to sit with it. You just need to drop that story. Sometimes this can be told they need to stop believing a story they're telling themselves when what they really need is to go deeper. The pain may be linked to the father wound. With someone who will sit, love, and guide them through the pain, he can recall when the first time he felt his not enoughness and grieve and put balm on that wound. Then he can realize it's not true, that he is enough, even though his father didn't give him that message. We need to be sensitive to men as they open up and be aware how often the father wound drives men's beliefs and fears about themselves and relationships. Leo said, that's so needed with the father wound. Men also need to do the work on themselves. Blaise Pascal said, all men's miseries derive from not being able to sit in a quiet room alone. That's a very famous quote. And that's really it. If they have the ability to sit in inner stillness and observe themselves and allow what needs to come up, and the misery we are spending all of our life fleeing from that inner stillness because we're so afraid of what would come up. It's like running away. It's like the cow running away from the storm.
that sentence really hit me very heavy, because I think about my life and how unable, or how I was just so unwilling to be alone, and to the point of like searching for people that didn't want to be near me, from that lack. And it's one of those things, once I at least went on the journey of working on healing my father wound, all that changed. I think about, when was I able to start sitting in a quiet room alone? And it was pretty much around that 25 time, when after I'd been working on this father wound for a couple of years. And, I think it's one of those things, when we have wounds, no matter how much work we do on them, it's always about the importance of being aware of them, because they can always creep back in. But I feel very confident in my work that I've done on my father wound now, and the work that me and my dad do today continuously with each other. But that really hit heavy, because I think about how most of my life, especially my childhood, was the unable to just sit there quietly.
The healing starts with letting everything fall apart, not being able to hold on in the strongest winds, as you say, Krista. Instead of the control as being bad, loss of control as being bad, we experience it as an opportunity to become whole and free. That's that step 1 of the 12 steps, right? It starts with the ability to sit with our shame, loss of control, pain, and humiliation, and to be loved in the midst of our not enoughness. When we're loved in our not enoughness, that's what makes us enough. And that's interesting about, addiction, is that what I've seen is, well, let me handle this in my small ego self. Let me master my addiction. And when it doesn't work, because the ego, how much can you keep white knuckling something? Because there's no transformational process of really dealing of why you are acting in the addiction anyway. You just think, I just need more willpower, and not all the comprehensive work that goes involved with overcoming something. And that doesn't work. So then they go back to their addiction. It's like, I can't fix it in my ego. And instead of going, it's about letting go. It's about the humbling. It's about being on the floor, as a basket case going, help me. I'm a mess, and I am facing my wounds and myself and what that's cost me and other people. When we're loved in our not enoughness, that makes us enough. Then we no longer have to focus on proving, promoting, and protecting ourselves. We need help with that and others to sit with us. We can't do it all by ourselves. Others need to love us through that. That's the divine gaze. In coaching, we have someone who will sit with us. But if we don't figure out how to follow up with that and develop a spiritual practice around our awareness, it goes away. We lose it. Once we realize we're enough, we still go out and accomplish a lot of shit, but we're not needing to prove anything anymore. That's the difference from we were talking about some of these podcasters that are just honestly going, hey, I'm building this because I'm needing to prove that I am enough. My fear that I am not enough.
Well, I think we're thinking of someone in particular, but he talks about how most high performers have a kind of base of that. Like
that they're not enough. Yeah. A great coach helps us develop an ongoing practice so we're able to do it for ourselves and get connected with our true self that loves and forgives us all the time. Self-forgiveness is the big one. And that's it. That's the connection to numinous love, the part of our brain that is the mystical part that is right there. That's the connection to the whole self that's going, and I call her numinous love, it's feminine divine energy, like you would say, the Holy Spirit, that is just loving you and forgiving you. And that is part of who you are. And I can love and forgive myself. The core of any effective spiritual practice is one's ability to be a witness to their experience. That's how we become emotionally sober. The ability to not get sucked into the drama of our emotions. It's the addiction to the drama, the stories we tell ourselves. It's what feels like life to us, like substance. However, real life doesn't feel like anything because it doesn't have all the drama. It just has this moment, and in this moment, it has everything. That's the ego mind, right? The ego mind goes, oh, I'm thinking past, future, this and that, comparing, competing. Oh, at least I'm something. We're so afraid of the emptiness of sitting in the room, in a quiet room alone. The paradox that we resist is the emptiness that's really enough. Instead, we have an attachment that we have to experience reality through our feelings. But that's not reality. Our feelings tell us things, but if we step back, I have my feelings, but my feelings don't have me. That's emotional sobriety. When we're emotionally sober, we're ready to grow spiritually. And basically what we're saying is, until you get emotionally sober and are able to witness your feelings and not be flailed around, then you can start growing spiritually. That's our daily practice, witnessing our feelings. That's what contemplation is. We allow it, include it, love it, let it go. And that's the divine gaze we give our humanness, right? That's the loving gaze we give to our own struggles. But we're identifying with the loving gaze. We don't have to identify with the small struggling self. We are that loving gaze. We are numinous love. Then what starts to emerge as we stop wrapping ourselves around our feelings is silence. Silence is where we experience union with love, in union with our true self. Our true self is our infinite self, which is all powerful, all loving, all abundant. It has everything we need.
How do you see men in your life that are afraid of falling apart and facing the emptiness? Do you see their burden to keep it all together as men and how society has taught them they are their ego construct? What thoughts come up for you regarding men who have been in your life?
Well, I would just say it's again, we look upon them with the tenderness as though they were our own sons. And I think my relationship and love for you, having Leo in my life, my father, my appreciation for men, that I can look upon them with seeing the wound.
So you would say you look at other men, you see me in other men, and that's how you will come from a more connection, awareness, and inquiry?
Yeah, that you're not coming from the judgment, from the disgust. You could see underneath the pain or the struggles of where they're struggling with the father wound and where the pressure of society, they got to keep it all together for the family. It makes it harder for men, especially again with no rite of passage, to be able to fall apart, to be able to face their own weaknesses, because there's so much emphasis on keeping it all together.
Defensive men to receptive men. When you are committed to love, growth, and healing, your weaknesses will transform to become strengths. Krista.
The capacity for us to transform is something that will surprise and amaze. Our hearts break open and pour out as we long to be our best selves. And again, that's what it is, Riley, when we were talking about, we can see a vision for anyone changing, but we don't know what it will cost them. When you hunger and thirst after righteousness, when you desire to live in love and be your best self. And that's what it takes, though. You have to desire that. So when our hearts break open and pour out, that's the way in.
Yeah, and I would say one of the symptoms of that is the embrace of criticism, right? Is really when you're wanting that growth and change, you need the perspective of others, and you go from trying to defend why you did things to embracing how what you did is perceived by everyone else, because now you no longer are attached to what is done, but you have the desire to do what is better.
I'm just reflecting on that father wound thing again and how these two go together. Is I think men that are really living under the father wound but not aware of it, is that their father was, quote unquote, good enough and provided and, kindness, but they weren't in touch with their own inner work to give that depth to the emotional life for them to process their own, more feminine awareness of feelings. And
well, I think it's much easier for a man or a woman to acknowledge they have a father wound when the father wasn't there. It's much harder to accept that you have a father wound for a father that was there, maybe was loving, but didn't give you any structure, or maybe gave you some structure, but didn't really provide any love. It's a lot easier to go, no, everything was fine. It's, to me, those are the people that are defensive. Mm-hmm. Not only are they defensive of them, but they're defensive of their father. Instead of acknowledging and accepting the shortcomings of their father. That doesn't diminish the man that they were in their life. You can still love someone even though they are the cause of some of your pain. And I think that is a lot of where the defensiveness and no, everything was fine comes from, because they don't. Because again, also there's such this urge or desire, and I agree. I think that's positive to take full responsibility for things yourself, right? To go, well, no, if it's a wound, it's my fault, right? And I think that is where then it can extend too far. Someone can be the cause of your wound, but it still doesn't have to. You don't have to blame them, right? Mm-hmm. Is you can go, okay, this could be the root of the pain, but I still have to do the work. Mm-hmm. But I think ultimately that's where the defensiveness comes in, because no one really defends the father wound or not having a father wound when their father was gone. Like, it's pretty obvious. It's like, yeah, clearly it's accepted. But when your father was there, I think there's just that desire to almost protect their own father.
Yeah, the patriarchal, right, to male authority. Help is on the way. Love is always for us and holding us, living on the mystery side. How sweet it is. Here I am again with Leo, who I met when I was 16 years old and he was 32. That was a long time ago. We have been friends, life partners, business partners, soulmates, family, and co-creators in our art and consulting work. He's the person I'm most aligned in our spiritual path as contemplatives. I value his transparency and insights about men and his own journey, growing closer to becoming a receptive man from years as a defensive man. Leo said, when you're defensive, you can't hear. It triggers us and gets us into a fight or flight, and you physically can't hear.
Well, it's the learner, downloader thing again, right? As soon as you are being a downloader, you're being defensive, right?
Yes.
You're going to your script, and this is your script that's kept you safe, and that's why you are turned off your receptiveness to other people and go to your defenses.
And can't make the space.
Right.
And can't make the space.
You pull, if your life is a castle, you pull up the drawbridge, you pull out the archers, you bring out the alligators, and you go, oh, we have to defend to prove that we don't have this father wound.
It's called an amygdala hijack, or DPA, diffuse psychological arousal. It's really hard for men because the ego feels threatened and the ego is very attached to its story of not being worthy. So when it senses anything that threatens its worthiness, it gets defensive and aggressive to protect itself. Before I'm able to go to receptivity, I have to understand the root cause of defensiveness. The man will say, it's because I'm being attacked. But that's not it. It's because the ego's attachment to the sense of unworthiness that I feel I have to protect myself as if something someone says will truly diminish my worthiness.
Well, really, what coming up to me is, are you being attacked or are your actions being questioned? Right? And it's so much of that is what we're talking about, of like separating yourself, of going, are you, is that action who you are and you want to die on that horse? Or is that an action that you maybe didn't understand how it was affecting others and now could make a U-turn?
Mm-hmm. We begin when we get to receptivity and realize that nothing anybody says or does will diminish my worth. It's an inside job. From there, I decide it's okay to hear another's pain. Then I said, a large percentage of people don't know how to work with shame within themselves. So if they feel it, they get defensive because it's too threatening. Until we're loved in our shame, we don't know how to deal with it. Leo said, right. I don't have to automatically feel shame when I hear another person's pain and think it's always my fault. I can stay in my true self. I listen without going to defensiveness. That's the first step to understanding. I hate to use the word, the phrase, but what we're talking about is the part that would be considered toxic in masculinity. The defensive men, that's partly what maybe toxic masculinity, but that's the part I understand where women have used that phrase. They don't mean masculinity is toxic in a whole, because of course they love.
They're referring to bullying, as far as I'm concerned.
They're referring, or the inability, the defensive, and the bullying energy that shuts you down, that is so defensive and so controlling that it's toxic to relationships. It's toxic to the person. What are your thoughts about what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think the defensiveness is a very interesting aspect because, again, what are you defending? Are you defending the choice you made at a business? Why you followed that and you don't want to seem inadequate? Or are you defending the way you responded to someone, that someone is feeling attacked or bullied by your response, and now you are defending your bullying of someone? And to me, those are like the signs of the wound, right?
Or anything that threatens intimacy.
Well, right.
Or that they're not okay. They're not good enough if they have any flaws.
Right. That's where it's like the inability to accept that sometimes we make mistakes and we can fix them. This desire to be perfect always, to me, is a big connection to the wound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can listen without going to defensiveness. That's the first step to understanding. I don't have to fix another's pain, but listen to the needs and show up the best way I'm able to support those needs. That's love.
Well, and so what he's also saying here too is not feeling shame when he hears another person's pain. What I hear is, though, too, of they're feeling pain from my actions or something I said. And so it's not that he's saying not to feel shame. Yes, because the shame isn't going to be the emotion that triggers the change. Mm-hmm. The shame is going to be triggering the defensiveness.
Right. It's going to go from you feel shame, so shamelessly you're going to bully somebody.
Right. And so instead you need to go to your receptiveness, to going, no, this criticism is here to sharpen me, not to wipe me out.
And I can sit with it because I have a true self that can hold it. I don't have to fix another's pain, but listen to the needs and show up the best way I'm able to support them. That's love. In most cases, the person is not feeling loved or supported. And if I hear clearly, by being present, open, and undefended, that's the phrase about being present. To hear is to be present, open, and undefended, because I know they can't diminish me. So I know I'm safe. I'll be receptive, and then I will make clear choices about how I can show up for them. So the skill is learning how to live in the true self. Even if I'm not able to get there right away, I'm able to at least talk about my defenses. Where is that defensiveness coming from? That's where the healing comes. That's the process that builds trust and safety. And it doesn't work all the time, but it's going to work much better than defensiveness. I said, so the opposite of defensiveness is being open, undefended, and immediately present. That's being receptive. In our true self, we're safe. We're in abundance, not in toxic shame. I use toxic shame here as meaning uniquely defective and not enough. That's I'm a mistake. It's not the healthy shame when we do wrong that I'm referring to. It's the place from which we're able to be most loving. And that's our practice to get better at living in our true self. But we can't always be non-defensive, and that's okay too. After reflection on this, I'll explain in Lessons in Listening to Myself.
What I really want to emphasize on healthy shame is when you know what's right and you choose to do what's wrong. To me, that's where healthy shame is it's not, oh, we made a mistake and I'm shameful for my mistake. It's when you knew what's right and chose to do what's wrong.
You behaved shamelessly. Yeah. You shamelessly behaved in your unconsciousness, like you have some awareness, you have no business acting this way to another person, doing this, being deceptive, anything, and you're shamelessly doing it. Yeah.
What was the biggest aha moment about when they say men are defensive? I just thought about in my journey of life and how my defensiveness was a hindrance to my growth. Whether it's growth spiritually, whether it's growth physically, whether it's growth in any aspect of my life, whether it's a business growth, whether, anything, I think I can truly root back the hindrance to my growth to my defensiveness. And so I think that's something to think about of where your defensiveness has maybe created shortcomings in your own life.
And I'm just thinking we can't fix men, but we can, for everyone, how do we make it safe? And that is the model of the infinity loop that makes it safe for someone to see why they are so defensive, to drop some of their defensiveness, to not trigger people's shame, but let it, through self-awareness, the shame rise up in themselves of where they're not living according to loving themselves and others better.
And how will you live more from the true self that's secure so you will model it for men? Obviously, being a man, one of the things I do, I think this is where all our health practices come into place. One of the biggest practices is I do a Wim Hof breathing every morning, and I find it truly grounds me and helps me create that space by just practicing that breathing, which from my experience practices the slowing of your mind. You wake up in the morning and things rush to your mind. And by taking that step, at least for me, and doing my breathing exercises, it seems to kind of erase my mind first thing in the morning and then slowly build on the things that I find important and I want to think about.
But I think it's we women, and from a woman, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're perfect.
No, it's just, we need to learn how to live in our true self and not be reactive and judgmental. but have really self-control over ourselves and finding the power over ourselves so that we can speak loving boundaries and awareness from that power to the best of our ability.
Can you say the very beginning of that again? You were saying
About women, instead of coming from sort of judgment and disgust, when we judge men as men are just defensive, which is this male bashing that's going on, seeing the complexity of and what do we need to do ourselves? How are we participating in this dance that is making it even harder for them to go to being receptive? We are being a stumbling block from men's growth when we are not in self-control ourselves and have aware of our this is stepping into the infinity loop, having power over ourselves, being aware of our own stuff, our own wounds, how we feel triggered. I mean, they can be that way and we don't have to be triggered. We can sit in inner stillness and try to make it easier for them, not be a stumbling block by our own judgments.
So the word I was looking for was the reactiveness.
Yeah, the reactiveness.
Because I think, one of the big complaints in the modern dating world with women is men don't open up enough, men don't share enough, men aren't vulnerable enough. And then on the opposite, men will go, yeah, because every time I do, I feel like that is used against me. I don't feel like it's a safe space because it seems to be this agency of using our wounds against each other. And so to me, the word reactiveness, right, it's from my own experiences with women and trying to open up, and what has stopped or limited that opening up has always been the reactiveness, right? Mm-hmm. So the inability to allow something to be shared and sit with it, the race to respond really can hinder the desire to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the race to not react, the race to react versus responding.
Right.
Yeah. The responding is coming from the infinity loop that is dropped into the field in connection, awareness, and inquiry.
The response is from presence. Reaction is from your emotional charge.
Yeah, your own defensiveness, your own self-protection in an unhealthy way.
Maybe your own wound.
Your own wound. Mm-hmm.
So the final question we have is, how will you show self-compassion versus hatred when you feel hurt and diminished?
Yeah, so it's again self-compassion versus hatred. You go to compassion, and that is the antidote to spewing hatred toward the defensive man.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to that, not taking things personally. You understand, someone's probably going through something. Let's have not pity, but hold them in our heart and understand that they're lashing out at you almost never has anything to do with you.
Yeah, and you if you're hurting because of a man's wound, you can have compassion and go, I just need to have compassion for myself for how this doesn't feel good. And that will keep you from going into raging and hatred and being really reactive.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for joining us on this journey of the Infinity Loop group. May this Father Wounds talk help you and guide you in your healing process and journey. Please share this with others, and thank you again for joining us. Till next time.